Welcome to another episode of Sustainability Unveiled, where we explore the intersection of business, sustainability, and innovation. Today, we're tackling a critical and complex topic. How do we navigate climate action in an increasingly polarized world? Our guest today is someone who has dedicated his career to proving that business can be a force for good. Nathan Stuck is an award-winning leader in the B Corp movement, founder of Profitable Purpose Consulting, and a driving force behind Be Local Georgia and the BLD Southeast Conference. He's worked on over 25 B Corp certifications, teaches an MBA course on B Corp at the University of Georgia, and is a sought-after speaker and author of Happy Monday, Designing Your Dream Career. Nathan brings deep expertise in building purpose-driven business, but he's also here to have a real honest conversation about the challenges we face in pushing sustainability forward, especially in today's divided landscape. From cancel culture to collaboration, we're diving into the nuances of what it takes to bridge divides and keep the momentum going. Nathan, welcome to Sustainability Unveiled. Thank you for being on with us.
Thanks for having me, Jessica. Always excited to, talk sustainability, maybe unveil
Exactly. Yes. Now, we have a lot to get into today, but before we get into the meat of our conversation, I really want to talk about your involvement and your stance and just appreciation along with support of the B Corp movement. You've been a part of it for years. So really, what drew you to this space and what keeps you involved at such a high level?
I'll save you the long answer. I'll tell you that in probably like 2013 through 15, I kind of hardcore burned out on capitalism. I got laid off twice in the same year. I had a couple horrible jobs. And there was just a lot that was like kind of like unveiling itself. See what I did there? And just like, but as somebody who had business degrees, it was very hard to like, I wasn't like business is stupid. I just didn't like what I was seeing. Well, like, why do we do it this way? Why is it so slimy? And then I got into like all good capitalism burnouts. I decided I should go get an MBA, keep studying business. When I got there though, like really early on, there was a project to help a company do B Corp certification. I had no idea what it was, but I met the CEO and his wife and a former MBA who had like interned for B Lab, and I was like, "Oh, is this the capitalism I've been looking for?" And ended up getting a job with him after I graduated. We got him certified. I stayed there for 5.5 years. Started my own company. 21 is a side hustle, 22 full time. But along the way, like 2018, I started the B Culture Call, which is a call within the B Corp community. I started B Local Georgia. 2020, I started Build Southeast. So I just kind of kept getting involved and I kept seeing gaps where there was nobody doing something. And so I just kind of naturally, I guess I'm a gap plugger, where I just jumped in and started doing the work. And now I don't want to say that keeps me here because I mean, I think, I'm not one of those, you always have those employees who are like, man, you'll see if I ever leave, this place would crumble. Like, no, it won't. I do have some
It will move
incredible.
on. It will keep going.
Exactly. It's bigger than any of us. So it's not necessarily what keeps me here. I just really love the space. I love the people. And I love the fight for a version of capitalism that works for more people and for the long term and is sustainable. And I'm a free market guy. So I also am kind of a little bit of like, let's let the best system win. Like let the best version of capitalism win. Like I want the fight. I'm not trying to like I'm reimagining capitalism. I'm not like sitting here going like we have to systemically tear capitalism apart. Like I think the tenets of capitalism are fine. It's just what we've let it become that has become a little throw up in the mouth inducing.
No, I can definitely see that. And you've been involved for such a long time. So how have you really seen this organization evolve over your time with them?
Oh, I think B Lab, just to throw this out so they don't confuse people, B Corp is the certification. B Lab is the parent nonprofit that oversees the certification. You might hear me use them interjectively. Oh, and full disclaimer, because everybody assumes this, I don't work for B Lab. I work for my own company that does B Corp consulting, and then I run nonprofits that are in the B Corp community. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, I think for me, I've seen it go from business as a force for good to a lot more advocacy.
Uh,
I don't know that that's good or bad.
What
I
do you think has caused it to go from, business for good to more the advocacy route? Do you think it's just the climate of what we are dealing with politically and socially over the past, 8, 10 years?
Yeah, I think some of it is that. I think trying to figure out, I think part of it was external forces, especially like, 2016 election, and then I would say probably everything that happened during 2020 between COVID and George Floyd and all those things, I think forced a lot of people to take a harder look in the mirror. And I think even B Lab had its own reckoning where it was like, was it three or four? um middle-aged white dudes that started it, kind of looking around like, did we build this thing? And again, I never say that knockingly, because I know
Yeah.
plenty of businesses where like it's, hey, me and my buddy are gonna, and you look at like just the way it doesn't make it bad, but I don't think it was founded with as much intentionality as they would have liked to have done if they could have gone back and done it again. And so I think there was a little bit of that coming too that spurred some of the more of a focus on like, this is a very monocultured community. But you also have to look at like, where did it start and where did it
Mhm.
really take off? And it took off in places like Portland, Oregon, and upper New England, like New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, like places that just aren't very diverse by
Like just in
traffic data.
general, they're just not diverse. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it got into that, and then a lot more climate action. And I think if anything, I think there's a little bit of like the younger generation got introduced to the movement. And I always like my TED Talk, I talk about how like, they show up to the party with like a can of gas and a book of matches, um, looking to burn, what to the ground. And I think they got involved too. And I think for in a good way, again, if this is balance, it's good. If it becomes all this, it's bad. But in a nuanced, good way, I think kind of forced B Corps to maybe evolve a little bit quicker, and do a little bit more than just be like not bad, but to be, or like exceeds or like meets requirements on a corporate review. Like we need to exceed requirements. And so I think there are some voices that have pushed this community to do more and go further. And that's ruffled some feathers, because there's some companies who are completely happy kind of being verified as a good company. But necessarily, I've heard the one quote somebody told me once was, my advocacy is running my company as a B Corp. Like, I'm not going to go letter writing campaigns and do all these things, and like we're just not going to do that. So it's a very interesting, and I think in within the community right now, you feel, I don't want to call it tension, but you feel a little bit of the, people that feel we need to be the loudest person in the room, and I think there's some others in there that feel like we just probably need to keep our head down, do the work, let the results speak for themselves, show off that we are doing all this incredible work while also remaining profitable, making payroll, adding jobs, kind of showing that I think the business world that this is a viable business model, that this isn't just a bunch of people sitting out in the woods, hugging trees. So we're
Singing Kumbaya.
school. There
Yeah.
are MBAs and PhDs and
Well,
lifelong business people who have decided to run their business this way, that it isn't somebody who doesn't quote unquote get it.
and I think, especially right now where there are so many, I have friends that work for the federal government, that work at agencies that are right now having to go through website pages and remove words like environmental, climate change. Um,
Pesky
Now
or
it's
acronym.
yeah, everything is changing. So that's what they're spending their time doing. And there are so many people too that don't want their name associated with a piece of work that's published, for example, that, you know, might come back to, in lack of a better term, bite them in the ass later on when it comes to funding, for example. So how do you help those companies really, bridge that gap between, wanting to hit your sustainability targets and goals and obviously be profitable but you've got some people that are, some stakeholders that are kind of stepping back now because there is just so much uncertainty and things are changing on a daily basis.
I think for most of us, I mean, unless you rely on government funding and grants, which some of us do. I mean, I've done some grant work. Usually it's private foundation, but still, um, I think you're going to be just fine as far as the customer base. I mean, I think, I don't know that it's going to get any more, if you're not a Delta or a Walmart or a JP Morgan or nobody's coming after the average 100 employee company for,
Mhm.
still doing diversity work. I think for a lot of my nonprofit friends, which I'm on a lot of nonprofits, I run a nonprofit. Um, we're definitely scared, and trying to figure out how to maintain our work without necessarily, and you're almost in this weird way stuck in this ethical dilemma of, does it make me a sellout to not say DEI anymore? And I don't know that there's a right answer for everybody. For me, I don't care. I'm here for the work. I'm not here for the poster or the billboard or the awards or to be the poster child of this board. Like I just don't care. I'm here. Did we drive results today? Did we move this plan one step closer from idea to pilot? Did we raise money for, this initiative? Did we, like, so to me, it's more about the outcomes. And I think maybe if anything, you're going to see, I think some people definitely are running a little bit scared. And again, I'm not here to tell you that's wrong. Depending on what your industry is, where you're located.
Mhm.
Because a lot of this stuff was never really controversial until recently. But also, to me, if you
Yeah.
said it, just stick with it. I think you're seeing, putting on my like corporate or my academic hat, um, you're seeing backlash against like, you saw it against Bud Light, and then it ended up they got hit from both ends because when they got pushed by
Mhm.
one side, then they completely backed and caved on the other side. So now they pissed off the people who they originally made the whole thing for. And then you have like Target, same thing, where like Target took out all the heat from the right, so then they caved. Now the left is mad, so you're like, I think you're better off standing your ground, or maybe coming up with a different term, or like kind of
Yeah.
take the bullseye off your back for a little bit, which is what I'm advising most people to do. Just call it. I mean, they know
Something
what
else.
we're doing anyway. They even said it in one of the executive orders, like, and if they call it something else, like, and then the whole like
Yeah.
snitch program to rat out your coworker who really secretly does DEI work. But
Well, it's like when did DEI become a negative term for people?
yeah, I mean, I think, if I'm being honest, I think and I heard somebody say this on a call yesterday, and I hadn't thought of it this succinctly. If you ask the average person to define DEI, if you ask 100 of us, you're going to get 100 very different responses. And I think therein lies our problem, that
Hmm.
we allowed the worst version of DEI to be accepted as the narrative. Because there was an element of, there's a difference between teaching history and feeling, the prevalence with which like white fragility circulated. And like, if you can't admit you're a racist, you're an even bigger racist. And like, some of it was very divisive, and I wasn't a fan of a lot of it. I think we allowed it to become that worst version in other people's eyes became the public version, and like we talk, the white fragility type books and everything, where everything did start to become like us versus them is kind of how we started to do some of this work, where again, the whole premise of like, if you can't admit you're a racist, you're more of a racist. And and everybody kind of taking the classes. And I think we had everybody afraid, even on the left, of what you can say and what you can't say, and everything. I wrote one time like everything on a scale of 0 to 10, where one is borderline ridiculous, five is an actual microaggression, and 10 is something like a Klansman would say. Everything became a 10. And we just had this whole like paralysis of like fear of doing anything. And in reality, I don't know, some of it was needed for some people, but I think we distracted ourselves from the actual work.
And the
Because within
mission.
that,
Yeah.
you started throwing away, you threw the baby out with the bathwater. And like I do a lot of work in Atlanta and like stuff like, the Fearless Fund got wrapped into this, where like all they did was go raise a fund with investors, private money, to invest in Black women-owned businesses. How the hell is that illegal? What's wrong with that? If that's what I want to put my money into, if that's where
Hmm.
I want to invest,
Let me invest.
let me invest. And like, so it became this thing where like any sort of good work or intentional outcome driven like systems design became this like enemy of, like, oh, white people. I remember having this conversation with somebody like, I'm worried for my 10-year-old. They're not going to have any chance to succeed in the world. And you're like, your 10-year-old whose parents both have corporate jobs and you live in Roswell, Georgia. Your 10-year-old's going to be fine.
Gonna be fine.
But that was the fear, and that was early post George Floyd that I heard that
Yeah.
comment. And I was like, this person's crazy. And then the longer this went on, I started to realize that was the prevailing talking point on the right. And I think this comes back to the left too. We don't listen to what they're saying. We don't watch the news. And then we get in a conversation. We go, you're crazy. And we turn
Hmm.
around. But whether or not you think it's crazy, if we are not listening and don't know what their fear is,
Hmm.
because if you're a parent, that's a fear. Okay, there's going to be no
Yep.
opportunity for my kid. That's a fear for every parent. So I don't know that we were truly, really listening to what is it that people are so afraid of. And I think we just kind of like, and I think we took Joe Biden's election in 2020 as a mandate on that, like that it was more of a, to me, a mandate on people wanted a moderate. They wanted somebody in the middle. They didn't want to have to check Twitter 24 hours a day. They wanted somebody who was going to, on the side of what I would say the the DEI, so the right side of the historical conversation. But they didn't necessarily. I think we took it as a this is for the like a mandate for kind of the what I would say the more progressive wing of the party's politics, and I think that got us
Hmm.
in a lot of trouble as we were never really listening and we couldn't really have an honest conversation because if you didn't agree with all of it, they kind of came for you with the pitchforks.
Yeah. Well, I want to keep talking about the whole listening aspect because you are a professor at University of Georgia. So when you are working with your students, how do you teach them to listen and to really, embrace both sides or multiple sides to come to, to be able to work together for the greater good if they're working on a project or, working within the community?
Well, first of all, the professors get mad because I don't have a PhD, so I'm a part-time lecturer.
Got it.
I honestly really try to teach my kids business. So I teach them the business of good business. So my biggest thing that in my class, I don't have some dream that every one of them is going to go work for a B Corp or I'm more teaching them how to implement these strategies in a this isn't about being right. It isn't about being the most virtuous. It's about how do I make the business case? It's about how do I roll this out in a way that will actually be successful? Like, kind of using DEI as an example of like, we're working with a company because we worked with companies that wanted to certify. So my students work on those projects all semester. If we're working on, a diversity plan for a company to bring in a more diverse set of employees, and then, obviously we get into the inclusion and the equity piece, but just if we're just are starting here, looking at like where are we recruiting? How are we, because you'd see these like, companies that they wanted to do good and they wanted to do these things. And it's like, how do you help them do it though in a way that is actually long-term kind of systems changing, even internally at their company? So where
Hmm.
are we recruiting? What KPIs are we tracking? Applicants, eyeballs, opens, complete resumes, like up for determination what makes the most sense, but what are we actually tracking to help this company become better? Or if it's something like a sustainability initiative, okay, great. Yes, it's wonderful to do X, Y, and Z, but how do we do X, Y, and Z? And how do we, even if it's napkin math, figure out kind of start to look at what that payback period is?
Yeah.
Let's talk in dollars and cents because I think we make a lot of these arguments of oh, wouldn't it be nice to have solar on the roof? And oh, and the polar ice caps are melting and this, and it's like, and after 3 years of power bill savings, the solar panels will be paid off, and then da 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 da. Like if you make the case like that,
Yes.
so teaching them how to kind of like be the, make that even for things like, again, not to harp on the diversity thing, but can you come back and prove to a CFO that your team cares about this? That there's a retention impact, that this is something your company is passionate about. It will drive your employee net promoter score. Like thinking about these things outside of just making because it's the right thing to do. Because in the way most corporations are structured, they do have a fiduciary duty to shareholders. And you're seeing that kind of play out now where like anybody taking ESG, you better be able to back that up as a fiduciary item.
Yep. The
That,
books better speak for themselves at this point in order to use that
yes.
term.
Yes, because you're seeing that start to play out where you're going to see lawsuits from shareholder. I mean, you already have, and then you're seeing legislation introduced in places like Kentucky, and yeah, you're seeing some of this stuff really start to people starting to try to figure out. I mean, I kind of one of those. It's a win, not if people come after the I don't want to say B Corp community, but at least benefit corporations, like the legislation where you can incorporate as a benefit corp.
Hmm.
That will, I mean, again, it's been introduced in several states, so I wouldn't be surprised if that continues to, basically is a neglecting your fiduciary duty, even though that's part of being a benefit corp, is you have a duty to your shareholders and your stakeholders. But
Hmm.
we'll see how that plays out, but I'm
We'll,
kind of ready for it.
we'll cross that bridge when we get there, right?
Yep.
Excellent. So I'm sure there's been a lot of different trends you've seen over the years. So what do you expect for the future when it comes to B Corp and, working with the clients that you work with now?
I see a future that's very bright. I think the toothpaste is out of the tube. I think the ship's left the harbor, whatever stupid analogy being that it's happening. And I say this all the time. I have for a couple months now. You can't legislate our values.
I
And
love
you
that.
do within the B Corp community have a group. We had a beautiful call yesterday about, how do we continue a lot of our DEI work? How do we continue a lot of our, and maybe for some it means not calling it that and doing things. But I think you're going to start to see, and I also feel like the future for us, especially in the DEI and the ESG space or whatever three-letter acronyms we're not supposed to say anymore, in the building inclusive teams that perform better because the research tells us they do, or the thinking about the sustainability, environmental sustainability, and the risks to our business. I think what you'll see is a pivot in the B Corp community now. I think we were leaders in the we must talk about this space. And so when I talk about that, sometimes it sounds like I'm like, oh, I don't talk about it. But I also think now is the next phase of that, like, oh, we talk about it and we put the thing on our website and we are committed to this. And now I think what you'll see is a pivot to a lot more action. And my hope
Mhm.
is in 10 years now, you'll be able to see some like incredible case studies like a Grayson Bakery who started this in the
Mhm.
80s, but like their open hiring concept it's created. There's workforce development program. Like I think you're going to see a lot of really, really cool stuff. Um, that maybe before was more, I don't know, like it less action oriented. I think you'll
I
start
was
to
going to say
see.
more in theory
Yes.
before, having the ideas, but now people are putting those ideas into action and really making purposeful decisions for their company and for their communities.
Yes. Yes. And I think I don't know. I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a really, really good thing for the community because we'll be able to stand here and stand on profit and stand on also like being able to share those tangible stories of being the leaders. And if you believe in this and you believe that it's the right thing to do, and again, I'm not asking anybody to be the loudest person in the room, but and kind of investing in our own businesses. There's
Hmm.
a reason multinationals are doing this. There's a reason, and I know that was a contentious thing in the B Corp community with Nespresso getting certified, some of these multinationals getting certified. But that to me tell like if they're doing this and they're huge, there's
Maybe I
something
should look
about
at it.
yes, future proofing your business. And, and again, we can talk about that later or not at all, but I'm always happy to have that conversation of, to me, that's when the business case is starting to be made, is when you get companies who make decisions based off the bottom line, doing the
Hmm.
right thing because it's the right thing for the bottom line. And I don't really care if that's why somebody's doing it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know you've worked on 25 or so B Corp certification projects. That maybe that number's wrong, but that's what I have.
Like 42
Uh,
now. I don't know.
oh, it's more than that. So that, thank
Somebody,
you for
a
correcting
prospect
me.
asked me to give them a number. I
Thank you.
put a spreadsheet together.
Excellent. All right. So what do you think in your experience is the biggest challenge that companies face when trying to align profit and purpose?
Ooh, the biggest. I might have to do a couple. I'll share them from opposite ends. I see one is people think that, oh, we want to do B Corp. And then you get into it and
Yeah, like,
it's a hard standard to hit.
yeah.
And so as we go through this, and if you're not willing to do this, and we don't want to do an annual impact report. Well, we don't really want to like be transparent with our employees in that way. Well, we don't really that bad. Is this stuff, and it's not just this will cost something. It's just kind of like, um,
Mhm.
we
It
don't we
sounds good, but
carbon offsetting.
yeah.
That's an extra cost there. And like I get it, costs that up, but at some point, if you're not willing to do the work to get B Corp, nobody, okay, very rarely has that had it happen. Does anybody just come in and go, I took my first run through the assessment and we're at a 130. You need 80. Most people come and like, oh, we took our first run through the assessment, we're like a 42. And so there's a lot of work to find that other 38 points in the assessment. And there are companies who I think come in, and I don't know if they think that this is a viable certification. Um,
Okay.
but it isn't. So we're gonna have to do some. So I can, for the most part, you can kind of tell going into this whether this is in the owner's DNA or they think it's just going to be an easy layup. And you also meet the ones who know it won't be an easy layup, know they have a long way to go, and are like telling you like, no, this is it. We're in. I want this. Like you are going to work with me. You're going to coach me on what we need to do. You're going to help us implement it. And those are kind of my favorite clients because those are like, um, what was the old Franz Kafka book? Die Verwandlung, the Metamorphosis. Why it came to
Okay.
be,
Metamorph. Yep.
I have no idea, but it's kind of like you get to see the whole
The transformation.
the whole verwandeln of the whole transformation of these companies from like good into something really great, and you see the employees get excited, and you see them, you know, um, actually make really, really, really big strides in the way they run their business. And so, to me, those are the most rewarding. But yeah, I think coming in with the expectations of it being a little too simple, or maybe they did think that it was kind of a not a pay to play, but like a we'll check a
Yeah.
couple boxes, we'll fill out the thing, and then what
And
do
then
we?
we'll be certified.
Yes, and it is contrary to what a now infamous soap company says. It is not easy for most companies to get to the certification. You can't just buy your way there. You can, but to buy your way there would mean, like benefits and pay raises and like all these things to get your points up. Like, yeah, you could technically buy your way there, but everybody that works for you is going to be very grateful that you did. So I think that's important to call out too. Like the only way to buy yourself is like, I guess we bought a lot of benefits for our team, or like so there's not a
Yes,
lot of
we're trying to improve morale in a way. So this is one way, and our climate culture and our climate at our organization. So we're just gonna, yeah, we're gonna pay.
yeah, yeah, and you're gonna pay in your client. I did have that happen one time where a company they weren't gonna get full points for 100% of employees making a family living wage, and they had somebody younger, single, no children, who was like 25 cents an hour off. Literally, we're on with the analyst from B Lab, and the CEO went into Gusto, gave him a 50 cents an hour raise. I was like, oh, that employee's gonna love them some B Corp.
Yep. Oh, that's funny. So when you start working with a company, and I know this depends on, that the initial intake score that they have, along with, when you guys start working together, how long does it usually take for a company to get certified? I know there's variables, multiple variables to talk about here, but in general, if you had to give us, the average.
I mean, average it should be about I don't want to say a year because it can move faster. Depends how big the company is and how complex it is. Like how much data are we gonna have to pull? And also, are we
Mhm.
pulling data or are we pulling data? You know what I mean? Do you have 9 employees or do you have,
Yeah.
340 employees where it's like, okay, becomes a lot more intricate. Um, and then I think it depends on the level of effort of, are they one of those that came in at a 40 or one of those that came in at a 72 where you're like, oh, we're pretty much, we're documenting some stuff and then we need to figure out where these other 8 points are going to come from. But there's not a ton to do here other than to make sure that you answered these questions correctly, that you can prove that you're doing the answers you claimed, and those types of things. But I would say from start to submit 3 months, and then a couple months in evaluation, and then right now I think it's up to 4 to 6 months in
Okay.
verification. So you should be
Okay.
able to get it done within a year.
It's bad. In
No.
the grand scheme of things, it's not bad at all. A year goes by quickly.
Yeah. Well, and a
That's what I
lot of
mean.
times
Yeah.
And a lot of times you'll get clients like I have one right now, still a prospect, but they want to do B Corp. They've been in business for about a year, so they're very excited. Like you have to be in business for a year, so they're ready to do it. But also, we started talking about the community section of the assessment, and they were very hesitant of like, we haven't done as much as we want to as far as our strategic impacts. That was part of why we want to bring you in because we know so, and they want to build out a really cool mentoring program. They want to do some work with some HBCUs up in the Northeast. So like they really have these crazy amazing aspirational ideas. They just don't know how to execute. So we're going to use that time while we're waiting in the queue and waiting for an analyst to really go deep in on their strategic impact and and
Hmm.
roadmap out, okay, if the end goal is this mentorship program with students from an HBCU, like what is the end of year one goal? Because it's not going to be there yet. So how do we
Hmm.
start to figure out how to set them up for success as they work towards these things and really have the impact they want? And how do we not have zero impact until we get to finish dream ideal state? So that'll be the fun part. But we can use some of the downtime while we're just again waiting in line for a B Lab analyst to free up to look at our assessment. We can use that time to kind of work on some of the other stuff, some of the implementation, some of the network connections, making sure people get to meet other people in their industry or potential buyers or just people I think that they will become friends with in the B Corp community. So using as much of that downtime as possible to do something, productive for them.
No, I love that. And when we met before, we talked about some of the projects that you've worked on and networking and making those connections. So, what advice do you have for business owners, maybe just starting out, could be students too, of how to get I don't even want to say get your foot in the door, but take those steps to attend, whether it's a community meeting or, a local town hall, just to get, your face out there, your name out there that you want to be involved.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of regions have B locals. So we've got like B local Georgia. We do
Mhm.
virtual stuff. Most of it's in person. Some of them are just volunteer days. So like there's a ton of ways to get involved. I will say same thing from a student perspective. There's a lot of people in the B Corp community. I mean, I think in the general business community that will make time for students because we were all a student at some point. Even if we didn't go to college, we were a student in high school. We were a young professional trying to figure out our career. Um, so I would definitely play the student card as much as you can. But what was the other one? Small business. I'd also say really for anybody, small business, even though you have to be a for-profit business to certify, the assessment tool is free. So whether you're a small business or a college within a university or a department, like you can use that assessment and go through it and kind of look at like how are we doing according to these standards. And again, you're never going to certify, but you can use that tool as kind of a framework for improvement. And for small businesses, young businesses, I mean, I as soon as I hit 1 year, I submitted my assessment because I was ready. Um, Use it as a foundational piece to build the company that you want to be when you grow up. Thinking about that future state and where do we want to be because some stuff won't be realistic at the beginning. Small, sometimes it's not, we're going to do a healthcare stipend, but we can't get a policy, or,
Yeah.
we probably won't have a 401k for a couple years, but we want one. So let's accrue for one. Like some of those things of like, what do we want to be and what are these actually going to cost? Are we, figuring out what is the viable way to get to said desired state? I think the B impact assessment, which is the verification tool, is an
Hmm.
incredible asset to kind of look through. And even if you're just wondering, like, I don't know how much secondary caregiver leave you're going to have. Does anybody think about that when they're starting a business?
No,
Is anybody thinking about
no.
volunteer time off or paid time off, or, is our
Hmm.
401k going to have a sustainable investing option? Like, you're not thinking about these things. So, not that they should distract from your main business, but it doesn't hurt to kind of plant these seeds in your head for, because the last thing you want to do is get so far out of the stable. Look, how many analogies can I use? Out of the harbor, out of the stable, toothpaste out of the tube. You don't
I
want
love it. Yeah.
so far out though that now you don't have to put a new window on the house. You have to bulldoze the house, tear up the foundation, and completely start over. And it becomes kind of turning the ocean liner versus turning a speedboat as far
Hmm.
as is the amount of effort now to kind of correct early foundational mistakes in building this with intention and building what you wanted to build and the kind of company that you wanted to build and will be proud of.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's absolutely great advice. And I definitely want to have you on another time to talk about future proofing your business, because I feel like we could have an entire episode just on that, just on that. But for those who are listening, if you are on the podcast webpage, we will put a link to B Corp, to the certification, just to get some more information to our listeners. But if people want to contact you, get in touch with you, what is the best method?
Let's see, LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm a LinkedIn junkie.
I think
Yeah,
most of us are.
yeah. I mean, it's the only one
Yeah.
worth doing. Every other one too, I just get sucked in. We have Be Local Georgia. We have an Instagram, for the nonprofit. But yeah, I'll go on to like posts. The next thing you know, I've watched an hour's worth of reels. And you're like, where did my day go? So I'm pretty
Been
much,
there.
yes, pretty where LinkedIn's now like, here, there's videos. I'm like, not interested. Nope. Just just not interested. So yeah, so I'm pretty much on there. You can connect through our website, profitablepurposeconsulting.com, but chances are I'm always on LinkedIn.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you for being on with
In the
us.
next
I've
60
enjoyed
seconds, ask yourself, how can I contribute to a brighter, more sustainable future, not just personally, but professionally? Let's embark on this journey together and shape the landscape of sustainable leadership for tomorrow. Take the first step now and make a commitment to lead with sustainability in mind. That's all for this episode of Sustainability Unveiled. Join us next time as we continue exploring the forefront of sustainable business practices. Until then, stay informed, stay sustainable.